Emotions are really vital for us. If we haven't any emotions, we're not going to decide anything. So if we want people to decide for our brand or against our brand or for a message against something, we need to add emotions. We're actually not able to make a mere rational decision. It's not possible. There are always emotions involved. However, they don't have to be the brilliant emotions. They could be very subconscious emotions that we hardly be aware of. But if something doesn't get an emotion, trigger an emotion, we can stay the same, we can save some energy, because we all like to save energy, and we don't have to react. So if campaigns or brands don't trigger any emotion, you can save your money.
Welcome back to another episode of SaltCubeAnalytics, a channel dedicated to decoding human behavior. My guest today is Gesa Lischka. Gesa is the CEO of the German PR agency Kochstrasse, an agency that combines traditional marketing strategies with neuroscience and evolutionary psychology, also called neuromarketing, to gain insights into customers' motivations, preferences, and decisions. What makes neuromarketing so interesting is the fact that the insights from this discipline can be applied virtually anywhere, not just in marketing. No matter if you are in corporate or private business, in negotiations, even in your day-to-day interactions, whether talking to your spouse, children, or the gardener, knowing what really motivates people and hence guides their decisions can be of tremendous value. The question is, of course, how can anyone know what others think and feel? Is that not only a catchphrase or the latest marketing hype without any substance? Some argue that major corporations and research firms are jumping on the neuromarketing bandwagon because they're desperate for any new technique to help them break through the omnipresent marketing clutter. That's actually true. Firms and corporations do look for something new, but that does not invalidate the methodology. On the contrary, evolutionary psychologists have established that we are born with mental programs and that these programs can be triggered and manipulated. How exactly this can be done is discussed in detail and with concrete examples in the interview. And again, you can apply all of this in your own life, no matter if at home or in business. But it gets even better. We all know that many processes in our brain happen automatically and without conscious awareness, but when it comes to decisions, we like to think that we make them with our conscious mind. Buy the red car or the green one. Marry the blonde girl or the brunette. Your choice, right? Well, scientists from the Max Planck Institute found that they were able to predict with astonishing accuracy which options participants would choose 7 seconds before the subjects consciously made their choice. So who actually makes your decisions? And now consider this. According to the latest in neuroscience, there are 3 independent brain areas that have to be engaged in a specific sequence and with specific stimuli during these 7 seconds if one attempts to influence decision making in oneself or in others. If you want to know how exactly this is done, all you have to do is to listen to this interview. In addition, we are exploring how to apply insights from evolutionary psychology to company brands and the ever more important personal branding, no matter the industry you're in. We are investigating with concrete examples how to influence people using the 12 universal archetypes, and Gesa explains how to design information in accordance with the latest insights of neuroscience so that you reach your listeners or readers on a conscious and unconscious level. Last but not least, we discuss some of the most prominent unconscious biases that all of us so easily fall victim to and how they can be used, for better or for worse, to influence people. This interview is packed with practical information, and you can apply this information to fundamentally change how you communicate and how you present yourself or your company. It is no exaggeration when I say that the results might amaze you. Gesa Lischka, good morning to Germany.
Good morning.
How are you? You look splendid. It must be, the sun must be outside.
Thank you very much. No, that's just my setting. It's not the sun.
Good.
Actually, it's quite cloudy in Germany, in Hanover.
Oh boy.
But we're not famous for sunshine in Hanover.
So true, so true. Gesa, what I found on the internet, I'm a brief introduction, and please correct me if I'm wrong, right? So first of all, you're a mother of 3, right?
That's absolutely right, yes. I've got 3
Okay.
boys.
Oh boy, how old are they?
They are 18, 16, and 10 years old. Mhm.
Interesting period. And in addition, you're the CEO of 60 Heads with your PR company called Kochstrasse, right?
Yeah, that's right. We're actually 74 now already.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. You do this since 1996. So when was the let's say the growth really happening, or was it consistent during this period?
It was actually quite consistent. We've started with 5 people. There were 5 friends, and we founded the company at an attic in Hanover. That's why we've got this funny name. And then we kind of developed from there quite constantly. Yeah.
You do B2B and B2C brand marketing. Maybe
Yes.
you elaborate a little bit.
Yeah. What we do is we lead brands and we create campaigns based on neuroscientific insights. That's kind of our special sauce, the neuro insights. Yeah.
We're going to discuss neuroscientific insights, neuromarketing, evolutionary psychology, that all overlaps. We're going to discuss in more detail. For now, I see that you work in partnership with the universities of Bonn and Hanover, right?
Yes, that's right. Hmm.
And if that's not enough, then you're also lecturing neuromarketing at the Leibniz University, right?
Yeah, that's right. I like to work with universities because I always say they've got a reputation to lose. So if the professors don't do a good job, they immediately lose their reputation. So they have to tell the truth.
Yeah. So you must have a secret trick here, because I cannot imagine how you handle 3 kids, 72, stuff, universities, partnerships, etc., etc. So how do you do that?
I've got an amazing husband and a beautiful team. Yeah, that's true. They support me a lot. Hmm.
You must have, absolutely, yeah. I have a couple of items on my list that I would like to discuss. I briefly go through them just as a intro. I'm very interested in the link between evolutionary psychology and neuromarketing.
Yes.
Then we can, of course, talk about, the whole brainstem, limbic system, neocortex. Mm-hmm. Then we will have an occasion to talk about, a broader introduction of what you do today in the Kochstrasse using, evolutionary psychology and neuromarketing. Then I would like to explore the value of evolutionary psychology and neuromarketing for a number of things like company branding, personal branding, benefits for consumer awareness, negotiations in the widest sense, relationship building, these kind of things. Another item that I have on my list are cognitive biases, right? Very interesting topic.
Very interesting topic.
Yeah. So those are, let's say, the highlights which I hope we can cover in our discussion today.
Sounds great. Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the link of evolutionary psychology and neuromarketing and how you build that all into the concept of your own company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, basically, we're using insights from evolutionary psychology to explain to our clients how campaigns need to work, how we can actually create brain-friendly communication. And it all boils down to evolutionary psychology. Let me elaborate on this. It's if you want to get a message across, first of all, you need the awareness, the attention of the client. And attention is something that happens in our reptilian brain, in the brainstem. And there we decide within milliseconds if we want to approach a message or something, or if we rather want to avoid something. And that comes down to evolutionary psychology, because we know in order to survive, we need to be able to decide within milliseconds if we want to approach something, because it might be our dinner or it might be a potential partner, or if we rather have to avoid something because we could be his dinner. And we have to do that within milliseconds. Otherwise, we are not able to pass our genes into the gene pool, because we might be dead. So all of our ancestors, they did a pretty good job on this, and we are still able to do that. So within milliseconds, we decide if a potential message is something that we want to give our attention to.
What sparked your interest in evolutionary psychology or neuromarketing? Or do you make a distinction between those two, actually?
I probably do, because in neuromarketing, I always call it a kind of a mixed science, because you need a knowledge of marketing and you need a knowledge of basic, design. That's at least what we do. And you do need to have a knowledge of evolutionary psychology and, neuroscience and behavioral economics. So it kind of all mixed together in neuromarketing. It's not a proper science. It's just a mixture, neuromarketing. And what sparked my interest, I've got a background in marketing and advertising. That's where I'm based. We started as a classic design and marketing agency. And I also did a degree in England in media and cultural studies, where I got really interested into semiotics and semantics. And about, it's probably 10 to 12 years ago, I came across Antonio Damasio at a conference, and he talked about the subconscious, the non-conscious, and somatic markers. And all of a sudden I realized, this is all linked together. We can use that in marketing in order to make our communication and brands more brain friendly, so that people are actually moved by the brands and by the campaigns that we create. And all of a sudden we are able to explain design. In the past, people either said, well, I like the design, or they said, I don't like it. And now we can actually explain it, why it's going to work. And that's a mind shift.
In your journey with your company, did you do this from the very beginning, or you switched somewhere on the way?
We switched on the way. As I said, we started as classical, design and creative agency. And then we added these neuro insights, and we realized, okay, if we apply these insights, how communication works on a subconscious level, we can actually create brands and campaigns that perform so much better than before, because we can actually address the hidden needs of the customers, the needs that most people don't know they have, but which are the true drivers of our behavior.
And since you mentioned design a number of times, can you give us an example how you incorporate evolutionary psychology or neuromarketing into a design? And maybe also elaborate, what is a design? You mean packaging design or publication design or website design?
Everything, like corporate identity the designs, packaging design, and websites, everything that you need in order to establish a brand and then communicate the brand. To give you an example, we did a relaunch for a big tourism brand in Germany, the TUI, and they asked us to do a brand relaunch for one of their sub-brands, First Reisebüro. And we found out that the subconscious, the non-conscious drivers of customers' behavior towards that brand were not holiday and fun, but actually security. They wanted security. That was the main driver why the customers approached the brand. Okay, so with this knowledge, we relaunched the brand. And to give you an example, if I show you a very organic form, like say some bubbles, or I would show you a very spiky star, and I ask you, okay, which sign is called Boo and which is called Iki? You would immediately know that the one with the round shapes is called Boo and the other one is Iki. There's no logical reason why that's the case, but your body tells you the one sounds nicer, and warmer and more organic, so it's probably more safe. And in our brain, we have got this bias that we think everything that is more organic and more warm and round is safer. And so we used this knowledge in the redesign of typography and the logo shape. And you might think, now there's an agency that earns a lot of money for just redesigning a couple of tiny forms. But we could actually prove that only by reshaping the typography and making it a bit more organic and rounder, we could increase the value of the brand, and people were willing to pay more just because we changed the logo, just the logo, nothing else that we tested. And that's why I think it gets really exciting in neuromarketing. That's why I love it so much.
I think you said something very elementary, right? So very crucial, actually. You can prove that it works. You're no longer dependent on somebody's opinion.
Absolutely.
The wife of the, let's say, Produktionsleiter, she doesn't like it. No.
Absolutely,
There's science behind it. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is a completely shift of the business, that we can prove design and liking and things. And that's something that in neuromarketing we use a couple of methods. Like, for example, we put people in an fMRI in order to decide which design triggers the reward system stronger, for example. So we can actually prove which design works better in the end.
And if you say we, you mean your company?
That's not only me. That's not only me, but that's the professors, as I said. That's why I like to work with professors, because they are not, it's not a company that's linked to another business and they want to give me the right results, but they just give me the results as they are, and then we have to live with it.
Yeah. Just in a nutshell, just walk me through how does that look like? So a company comes with a specific challenge,
yes.
And then you have your contacts in the various universities that are already named. Some of them may probably have an fMRI scanner, and you then let the university execute the research.
For example, that could be a possible way how to do that. How we always start is we start with something we call a neuro checkup, because in a lot of cases we don't have to do that study, because we know from studies that we've done in the past that we know, okay, this is a very likely outcome. So we can actually tell our customers in advance or give them some hypotheses.
Hypotheses, yeah.
That's the difficult word, yes. How we could actually change the product, the brand, the packaging in order for it to perform better. And if that's not enough, we can always go into a study, and then we use different methodologies. It's not always advisable to use an fMRI. There are other methodologies that might be a bit cheaper that answer different questions, for example. So then we start with a study. A lot of times we try to establish the implicit motives behind a brand. So we try to find out what's the non-conscious driver towards a brand, because we know that these non-conscious drivers, they drive our behavior far more than what we actually say. Yeah. So in the past, we said that our advertising budget, like 50% of our advertising budgets, they're spent in vain. Unfortunately, we don't know which 50%, and now we actually do know.
So from what you see, and talking about global brands, which probably everybody knows, yeah, if you can name a brand which you think incorporates this new way of marketing the best way, and why you think they do it the best?
That's a difficult question, actually. I know that the German brand Telekom, they're using neuromarketing, and they're doing a good job. And I know that Ferrero, they also use neuromarketing. They've done a couple of studies, very interesting studies, and they're also using neuromarketing. Mm-hmm.
But if you see a commercial, for example, can you spot what they're doing? Can you see what they're doing well and what they don't do well? in terms of neuromarketing?
I can always say, always tell what commercials work and why they work. I can't always say if there's neuromarketing behind it, because we've still got very good creative people who do good work out of their non-conscious because they're just good. Mm-hmm.
I read a couple of research papers in preparation to this interview, and I found one, and please correct me if I'm wrong, right? So if there is a symbol representing money, for example, somewhere in the background from a website or a magazine or whatever, in regards to a commercial, then only the it doesn't even have to be a picture of a dollar or a euro. Yeah, it's any type of symbol like a suitcase, for example. Yeah. It triggers some selfishness as a response.
Yes.
So if you use that kind of symbol, let me think this through, for let's say a charity, you're doing it not like you're supposed to do it. So maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah, that's true. I've heard of this study as well. We call it the dollar eyes effect. Because immediately we are in this money-making mindset. And when we are in a money-making mindset, we tend to be more selfish. Yes, that's true. We want to fulfill our own needs rather than the ones of other people. So for charities, yes, it might not be advisable to use these symbols. Mm-hmm. And I've got another interesting fun fact when it comes to money. Like, if possible, you should avoid the euro sign or dollar sign when you show your prices. And the reason for that is because when we have to give away our money, the area in our brain that's related to pain is triggered, the insula, and we don't like that. So it's easier for us to pay with our debit card than with cash, and it's even easier to pay online than with our debit card. So the further away from we are from the actual feeling and touching of money, the easier it gets for our brain, the less painful it gets for our brain.
You're trying, I think, 2 times harder to avoid loss than to gain.
Yes, right? Yeah. That's true. And I think it's so fascinating that it actually creates a kind of pain when we have to give away our hard-earned money. Mm-hmm.
In our subconscious system, absolutely.
Yes.
In our neuron pathways, somewhere there are triggers. Yeah.
And you can see that, I mean, I've spotted that in a couple of restaurants. They are not using euro signs behind their prices any longer. So that's clever. It actually increases conversion by a couple of points.
Yeah, or they have the menus where the ladies don't see the price at all. I think that's the best strategy.
That's even better. But that's also sexist.
Yes, I heard it, but I meant it more in a gentlemanly manner, right? So the lady is free to choose whatever she wants to without having to consider, the price.
Oh, brilliant. I like that.
Okay.
I've not been in one of these restaurants.
Okay. Yeah. Framing is something I would like to discuss later. Yeah? But what we just said because it's a type of framing, only not with words, right? So you place a picture somewhere as a context, and it changes our behavior. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm very much interested in words myself as a trained linguist, what we can do with words, because people think we have absolute control over our words, which is not true, right? And I have one example that I would like you to comment on. Yeah. There was under George Bush in America, and it's always good to talk about the Americans, they're far away, right? Under his reign, let's say, and when we talked about global warming, climate change, etc., the main phrase used was global warming. And from what I read in some research papers, some oil companies were not too happy with that terminology, because it kind of, it triggered people to want to do something. So they changed it into climate change, where according to research, people are less declined to take actions. Yeah. Now, Al Gore actually used neuromarketers in 2018, and they did some research with different terminologies, and the best would have been climate crisis, which is why you hardly ever hear a politician, especially in the US, talk about climate crisis. All they do is climate change. It's softer. Yeah.
I like that. I don't like it, but I've never heard it before, and it's very interesting. It's so true. It makes absolute sense to me. Yes. Absolutely. Because climate change, that's somehow neutral, while it's crisis, that triggers fear. And whenever there's emotion triggered, we want to get moving. We call that effect heuristic, because whenever there's an emotion, there's motion in that English word. We want to get going. I always give the example, if I get a call from school and they tell me, Frau Lischka, your son has just had an accident, I wouldn't say, oh yes, thank you for the information, and put the phone down. I would say, oh no, shall I come immediately? Is he fine? What shall I do? So I would get into action. So emotion gets us into action, and obviously companies like oil companies want to avoid people getting into action and getting too emotional, and that's probably why they chose that phrase. So yes, very interesting.
I have another example which we discussed already in our preparatory call. I think it was between Apple and Samsung, right? And it's about a study, an fMRI study, because there is a significant difference between iPhone users and Samsung users. According to a study I read, if you put Apple users in the fMRI scan and you flash images of their picture, they get triggers in the limbic system, also emotional triggers. Whereas when you are a Samsung user, you don't have that, right? So Apple must do something in their marketing campaigns over all those years, which triggers people's limbic system, even if they hear or simply for a second flash an Apple product, right?
It's such a brilliant example. I really like that. And you're absolutely right. They've done a lot of things right. Apple has. That's probably the reason why everybody's using Apple as a good example. I've heard of another study where they've shown that Apple users are actually more creative when you give them a task to solve. If you prime them with the Apple logo, or you prime people with an IBM logo, people who have been primed with the Apple logo, they find considerably more solutions, more creative solutions, than people who are primed with an IBM logo. And that's also amazing, I think.
Okay, so what you're saying is, it's not that creative people buy Apple products. What you're saying is, if you use an Apple product, you become more creative,
Absolutely,
right?
You're more creative. It's true. And that's the amazing effect of brands. Because brands, they add value. And this is something I always say, that's our task as marketing managers. We have to think, okay, what kind of value can I add to my brand? And a lot of companies, in my perspective, they make the mistake that they only build their brand around their product. So we don't have any added value. So to give you an example, that would be the same as if Apple said, well, we've got amazing computers, amazing technology, the fastest processors. So if they had built their brand only around their products, but they didn't, they added value, and that's what we pay for.
Okay, and if you would have to define how they added value, could you give a couple of examples?
How they added value. I always try to explain that a brand is nothing else but a network of neurons, connected neurons. So we've got a couple of associations in our heads that that kind of build or project the brand. So let's to make it more practical, you could say that the Apple associative network in my head, that's the kind of image that I've got of Apple. So, and our question is, how do we build that network in people's minds? So that's our task, to build a network of neurons in people's heads. That's what we do in branding. And how do we do that? First of all, we try to establish what kind of networks do we have to establish, or do we want to establish? If we say, for example, that we want to add the value of creativity, we have to link the product to creative stories, obviously. It sounds so easy, but basically it's all we have to do. We have to build a network. And how do we do that? We've got two possibilities to do that. You can build a network either through penetration, through repetition. So you repeat the same message again and again and again and again. So you kind of build a Grand Canyon for the neurons. So that's how you build an associative network. And the other possibility that you've got is you can build the network through emotions. If you've had a very high if something had an emotional impact on you. Let's say if you remember your first kiss, you can probably remember your first kiss because it was very emotional. And what happens is that a lot of hormones actually flood our body, and they kind of work like little anchors or hooks in our brain, and they make sure that the story sticks to our brain. And so that's another way how we can build value and brand value.
So how do you connect the first kiss, the sentiments, the hormones from the first kiss to a product?
From the first kiss to a product. Well, if you, for example, let's say if your first kiss happened in the Deutsche Bahn, you will always have a positive sentiment towards the Deutsche Bahn if it was a positive experience, your first kiss. Yes. You could also link positive sentiments through sponsoring. That's what happens at football matches, for example, because a lot of times the brands that you see, they are not linked on a rational level towards the game. And still we get that connection. It happens on a non-conscious level. You just have to juxtapose the emotion to the brand. There doesn't have to be a rational link for it to work.
Okay. I tried one more time, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about Apple, but because I saw this research, what would be your professional opinion, how Apple achieved that people in fMRI see their limbic system triggered by Apple products? How did they achieve this? Versus Samsung, which also spends, I don't know how many hundreds of millions on commercials. So what is the fundamental difference that Apple applies in his marketing strategy?
That's something I'm not 100% sure on. That's just a guess now. Yeah. I think that we've had enough positive, rewarding what's the word? Ereignisse. We had enough
events, rewarding events.
Yes. So I think with Apple, we had enough positive, rewarding events that we've built a kind of Grand Canyon towards the limbic system. So the moment we see the brand, our limbic system is triggered because we remember that.
Okay. That's so because you say Grand Canyon, just for our listeners, So if you have an experience once, it's like a little path through high grass. But the more often you walk through this little path, it becomes more and more a literal Grand Canyon in our neuron path. Yeah, that's what you mean.
Yes, absolutely. I call it the Neuro Motorway. You're either on a little path and your brand is not connected to that association, or you are on a Neuro Motorway, and the moment you see the brand, you're reminded of that emotion, for example.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Now you reminded me on something which is not on my list here. Your Neuro Motorway, because I saw you speaking about it. I even saw you give a presentation about it. So can you encapsulate this?
Yes, absolutely. I tell my clients that they have to focus on one message at a time for a brand. We don't want to give out the message that we are the fastest, the cheapest, the best, the sexiest. We want to focus on one message. And why is that? Because in order to build connections, we always say neurons that fire together, wire together, and we want to build these neural connections. In order to build these connections, you have to repeat messages. And for example, if I have coffee with my friend, the neurons for coffee fire, the neurons for friend fire, and they build a connection, and it's like walking down a path with high grass. And the next time I've got coffee with my friends, the neurons fire, and they realize, there's already a path. I can go down there more easy. And the more often I do that, the bigger the path gets, and all of a sudden I'm on a Neuro Motorway and I only need to see coffee and I think of my friend. And that's what we want to achieve with brands. I want to see the brand and I think of the emotion or message that we want to connect with that. So problem is, if I don't repeat that, it's as the same as in nature, the path grows back, the grass grows back. So if I have a lot of messages, I just create a lot of small single path in the heads of my customers, but no, not one single motorway. So what do we do with brands? We measure with tools what kind of motorways customers already have concerning that brand. And then we can check them off and say, okay, you've already established with your clients that you're the cheapest and the fastest. So we only have to use that a couple of times so that the grass doesn't grow higher. And we don't have to spend that much money on that message, but rather we can concentrate on a new message that you want to establish and where you want to add value for your brand.
Okay, and how do you measure what is already established, what the brand has already established? How did you do that?
We can measure that with a method called Implicit association test. It's quite an old methodology. It has been invented in the 50s already. And what we measure here is the response within milliseconds, so that the response is still on a non-conscious level. So, well, basically we measure if people react on a motorway or if they're still on the path.
So you're not relying on self-report. You actually measure the brain. Again, in the fMRI or EEG, how do you do that?
That's where we use this implicit association test, and you can actually do that on a computer. That's really easy. So you don't need to get people into a lab. So it's not expensive, it's very fast, and it gives you a lot of really valuable insights. That's something that we do always before we start working with a client.
So you measure how fast someone hits the keyboard.
Exactly.
Basically. Okay, very good. Now, continuing from this topic, I would like to explore a little bit the value of evolutionary psychology and neuromarketing in different contexts. We already have talked a little bit about company branding, and that you observed that many companies do not or miss a chance by not highlighting the added value.
Yes.
I know we scratched it already a little bit, but maybe we could. I try to avoid compound questions, but there are two components. Also a little bit more about company branding in general, and then a little bit more information about how they can avoid missing a chance by not highlighting the added value.
Okay, let's start with the value of branding. There has been a recent study where it showed that brands who invest into branding they create more value for the company in 10 years' time than if they only invest into sales and campaigning. So I think it's 70% more almost. So we are fans of branding to get in that to getting that right. Okay, so I see a big potential especially for B2B brands when it comes to branding, because a lot of B2B brands, they still focus on the product. So most brands, B2B brands, are based or built around the product because basically there was no need for them to add value. But today, the markets are getting more competitive. There are a lot of components, for example, come from China. They've got the same quality, and they just haven't got the brand in the meantime, but they've got a lower price, same quality. So what we need to do in B2B, what we had to do in fast-moving consumer goods a long time ago, we need to add context, this added value. If you look at chocolate, for example, chocolate bars, you've got, I don't know, 1 million different chocolate bars, and you could say, well, they've all got the same product. They sell chocolate. But what did they do? They added value or meaning or context to that chocolate. So I'm not only buying chocolate, but chocolate plus, as I call it. And this plus, that's what we are interested in. We want to find out what's the plus that's the most relevant for customers, and that's what we can find out with neuromarketing methods. And then we create this plus around the brand. And how do we do that? We are using forms and colors and shapes and, of course, storytelling to add these values. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for chocolate, I think that's relatively easy because if you eat chocolate, you know your brain is swamped with neuropeptines, to make you feel good, etc., etc. But if you turn this a little bit around, let's say I work for one of the largest telecoms in the world, right? Mm-hmm. It's a very technical environment. I don't see much of emotion and exactly the added value that you just described. Let's take the example of a telecom, a large corporation, and try to put it in that context. Mm-hmm. How could they highlight, incorporate whatever the added value of what they're doing?
Mm-hmm. If we come back to the Apple example now, if you compare Apple and Samsung, they are both technical products. There's no sexiness whatsoever if you consider it on a rational basis, and that's exactly what you could do with telecommunication. You could become the most creative telecommunication provider. So people think, if I use that brand, I add something to my personal image. I can show the world that I'm more creative than people who are using the other telecom brand. So it becomes a sign of status, for example. It could become a sign of safety. It could become a sign of stimulants. So we would have to establish that. What's the biggest driver within the target group? Okay. And then we add that value. That doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes quite a long time, but it's absolutely possible.
How exactly could you achieve that?
Okay, if we said, for example, we want to link the telecom brand to creativity, and say so that if I use that brand, I consider myself to be a more creative person. First of all the communication that you use, all the colors that you use, all the language that you use, they have to be far more creative than that of your competitors. So that's the first step. You have to differentiate yourself in a very creative way from your competitors, that people perceive you as, oh, that's a creative way of addressing me as a client. Oh, that's a very creative way of talking about telecommunication. Oh, they are supporting all these other creative people. Or I can see that leading creative people are using this brand and they are absolutely happy about this. So this is how we build a network, an associative network around the brand that says, well, this brand is obviously linked to creativity. And this happens in our non-conscious. It doesn't happen on a conscious level. So we're not telling people we are the creative telecommunication brand. We have to avoid telling people. They have to feel it.
I get what you say if we talk about B2C, as a business to consumer, right? What about B2B? business to
It's
business?
absolutely the same. It's absolutely the same, and that's where I see the biggest potential for a lot of B2B markets, because they well, in my opinion, a lot of them haven't seen the potential that's in there for them. Because why shouldn't be a B2B brand not the brand that's the most creative in the business? Why shouldn't they be able to add this value? Maybe creativity is not the right value for B2B brand, I give you that, but it could be the brand that gives the buyer the highest status, for example. And status is something that people are always after, even in a business to business context.
Yes, from evolutionary perspective, and I'm going on very thin ice here, right? Women prefer status over let's say beauty, yeah.
Yes.
And men prefer status because women prefer status, yeah.
Absolutely.
A lot of books written about that. I know I'm on very thin ice. Yeah, I'm stopping it here, but
I'm afraid
absolutely.
I have to agree on this one. Yes. And sorry to elaborate on that one, because that's not even difficult to achieve. For business to business brand to add status to their brand. That's just, again, a question of the right forms, the right colors, the right words, as you mentioned before in your example. And with neuromarketing, it's not even difficult to find out which words should we use in that context, because we can use artificial intelligence that tells us exactly what are the right words with the right sentiment and the right kind of status that we want to use in the context of that brand.
Now I'm curious. Tell me. We are using artificial intelligence actually for sentiment analysis, etc., etc. So tell me. I need to know more about this.
Yeah, it's actually it's a tool called NeuroFlash that we're using there. You can check that out. It gives you the sentiment of words that you're using, but that would be a bit easy. You can tell the artificial intelligence what kind of image you want to create, and we've worked together with them, and you can also add archetypes. You could tell the software, okay, I want to communicate within this kind of archetype. That's the habitus that I want to create around my brand, and I want to create the following associations. These are vital to me. And then the artificial intelligence tells you what kind of words would help you here.
Incredible. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
But you spoke about the 12 archetypes, right? Mm-hmm. I have them on my list. We will discuss them. We will discuss them in a moment. I have a question in between. Neuromarketing itself, as far as you can tell, percentage-wise, application in, let's say, Germany or global. But is it still the very beginning, or are we already past the early adopters? Where are we?
I think we are still in the early adopters phase. I'm afraid. It's still. I realize that a lot of people are more interested in it because they understand the value that's behind it, and it's an intriguing subject. I think that a lot of people find that interesting. However, a lot of companies I work with, they have heard about neuromarketing, but have never applied it in their daily business so far. So I think it's still early stages.
For a behavior analyst like me, it's absolutely fascinating because it's absolutely matching with what we already know about human behavior, right? Mm-hmm. How easy it is to manipulate. Again, I try to avoid negative connotations in regards to neuromarketing, but it's definitely used also on the political playing field, right? And in times like these, if you analyze actually what's communicated via all the media, it doesn't matter in the East or in the West, it's quite,
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. And it's my personal mission that every company, at least in Germany, knows about neuromarketing and uses neuromarketing to communicate, because I believe that we can create communication that's more people-friendly and more people-pleasing, and that's actually something that improves our tomorrow to the better. I mean, I'm aware that you can always use it to create dark patterns as well, but well, we stick to an ethical codex, and that's something that's important to us.
Yeah, maybe also worth outlining, neuromarketing is not a red button which says buy. Yeah, this is not how it works.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a bit more complex.
It's a bit more complex. Yeah. If we move now to personal branding, and personal branding becomes in these times where AI, and again, I know what I'm talking about here, AI speeds up so fast that more and more people have moved and will move into the service sector, right? The service sector, emotional intelligence, for example, is one of the sectors where artificial intelligence is really still, so in infancy, really challenged, right? So personal branding in that context becomes more and more important. If we think about neuromarketing or evolutionary psychology in terms of personal branding, what would be your recommendations? Let's say, I don't know, on LinkedIn, on communication, on business cards, on the whole spectrum.
When we advise people concerning their personal branding, it's quite a similar process we take them through than with professional company brandings, for example. We always start with their positioning. What do they want to stand for? What's their one message? What are the neural motorways that they want to create in the brains of their customers? Because yes, they're a personality with character, but in the media, they want to have one message that they stand for. So it's quite a similar way, actually.
We talk about the visual, we talk about the verbal, we talk about the emotions, we talk about colors.
Absolutely. We talk about associations. So what we guide them through the process would be, first we find out about the archetype, for example, what archetype they want to be represented in. Then we establish associations that are vital for them to establish. We establish associations that they should avoid. For example, we establish the kind of language that they're talking in. We find the right colors that actually support their message and their archetype, and we find the right forms, we find the right storytelling for them. What stories can they tap into? Because we like stories. Stories have already created an associative network. So if we use stories, we've got a big chunk that we can implement into the brain, and that's there then. So we can build from there on. So that's why we like stories.
Okay, and can you give us an example?
How storytelling works? Maybe it might be easier if we go to the archetypes, because all the archetypes are linked to stories that we know from our childhood. And so let's
do that.
Yeah. Okay, so when we do story.
Maybe first explain archetypes in the context of neuromarketing. And I know you have 12, and if it's up to me, we can discuss all 12 of them.
Yeah. All right. Let me check if I've got all 12 of them here. I'm not sure if I've got all the cards here when we can we fit them. Okay, so archetypes in neuromarketing. We use archetypes in neuromarketing because they help us to build brands. Archetypes are a context that have a concept that has been established by C.G. Jung, psychologist, and we also use them in neuromarketing, and archetypes are also used in Hollywood for storytelling. So why do we use archetypes? Science says, well, basically there are 12 archetypes, but some say there are more, but we work with 12 archetypes, and archetypes are kind of stories that all cultures in all the world know. So it's, for example, people in Germany would know a story about a rebel, and people in Africa or South America would also know stories about a rebel. We have a common understanding how rebels work. Our stories are completely different. But the underlying concept of how rebels change the story, it's similar. It's identical. So we can use this chunk of identical understanding and put it into the brains of our customers the moment we use archetypical stories. So that's the reason why we tell our customers, well, it's easier for your clients to understand your brand if you communicate based on an archetype. Let's say the rebel. And if you're communicating in the archetype of a rebel, your colors are louder. Your typography is bigger. Your words are completely different. And so it gives us a lot of insights already into the design, but it also helps people, let's say, for example, you're working at a call center. Even if they don't understand lots about marketing and about the differentials and about USPs, we can always say, we are the rebels of the telecommunication. So you can be different, you are louder, you are cheeky at the telephone, and it gives them a story they can relate to. And that's why we love archetypes.
We don't have to go through all 12, yeah, but give us the top, let's say top 3, top 5, whatever.
Well, they're all top.
Oh.
They're all top.
Okay.
Well, okay, let's let's start with a rebel. I personally like the rebel. The rebel says, okay. I'm against it. I'm different. I'm not interested in the norm. I'm against the norm. So if you say it's white, I say it's black. So that's the attitude, the habitus of the rebel. And a typical rebel brand would be Mini, for example. They try to be the rebel of the car industry. And people who want to be a bit rebellious, they find it easier to identify with a brand like that. Another archetype.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Since you talk about cars, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, okay, if Mini is the rebel, what is Tesla?
Tesla would be the innovator.
Ah, okay. Let's continue with that one.
Okay, the innovator constantly creates new things. The innovator is always pushing the limits. And so the first idea that you have in mind when you come to an innovator brand, I will get something new. I will get something fascinating and it's brand new. And this brand will be the first who is adopting this technology or whatever. That's the image of the innovator. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. What else do you have?
Okay, I've got the magician. And the magician is famous for transformation. Let's say you've got a problem and whoosh, I've got a magical solution for you, and I'm not going to tell you what's my secret sauce. That's my secret, my magic. I do my magic, but I can promise you, you will be so happy and you will be so transformed after you've used my product. That's the magician.
Okay, and all of this is applicable in business branding and in personal branding, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Let's take two more.
Okay. Then we've got the hero. Here we've got the hero, strong hero. And the motivation of the hero is to overcome obstacles. And by overcoming, helping others. So the hero says, okay, I realize there are lots of obstacles on your way. Let's say you want to build a house. I understand that's really difficult, so much bureaucracy and so many things you should know. But I'm your hero. I will make things easier for you. You just have to follow me. You can trust me because I'm strong and I'm trustworthy and I know the business, and I will get rid of all the obstacles in the way for you and help you to achieve your goal.
Okay, one more.
Okay, that's the jester. That's the jester. And the jester is funny. And the jester is allowed to say the truth, even if the truth hurts. And it's fun. And for example, the brand True Fruits, I don't know if you know them. They're the jester, they're cheeky, and they make comments that might not be politically correct, but they get a lot of attention and they're allowed to say that. And that's a really interesting brand because they manage to add value to their brand. It's not just a juice, it's not just a healthy juice that I consume because I want vitamins or whatever, but they've built a brand and added value. So they're the cheekies. If I can identify myself as being cheeky and allowed to tell people the truth.
Okay, so if you want to either maintain, strengthen, or change the image of your brand, how do you decide which archetype to choose?
That's a really interesting question. We've got different ways to establish that. It's either we just do a workshop with people, with the company, and say, okay, well, in theory, you can be either archetype. It doesn't matter. You just have to decide on one archetype because we can put all messages into an archetypical story. So
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in which industry you're in.
Yes.
You still can choose any of those archetypes, or are there some correlations?
You can choose that archetype. There are some archetypes that are very closely linked. For example, if you work in the service industry, you are very much linked to a caregiver. It's easy, but we try to tell people be aware of very obvious links because it might mean that you're not adding value to your brand, that you're still on product level communication kind of. So what we also do is we ask clients of that brand in what archetype they perceive the brand to be. So we establish the
baseline.
Baseline, thank you. We establish the baseline,
and then you build on it.
And then we build on it and think, okay, what would be a better fitting archetype, for example. And another way we've worked on mythology with the university again to check out different archetypes, what kind of different archetypes are activated by the brands already. And then we can tell the brand, okay, what archetypes they should increase in order to create more value for the brand. We can actually tell that there's a correlation between brand value and the kind of archetype they are working with. So that's a study that we have to do, but then we can tell the brand what are the best archetypes, what best archetypes would be.
I think from our conversation, I have a recollection, but I'm not sure if I get the context right. The strategies are depending on what you want to achieve. No, what sentiment you want to, or what desire you want to trigger, status, safety, security. This kind of. So what's the correlation here?
Yeah, there are different. That's what I tried to mention before, that our hidden motives, our non-conscious motives, are our biggest drivers for behavior. And we try to find out these hidden motives. And
how?
With using an implicit association test. That's how we find out the hidden motives. And let's say the strongest hidden motive toward that brand would be status. And then we know that if we show images where your status is increased, that people tend to see that image more often than an image where we don't show the increasing of status, because our attention is driven towards, on an unconscious level, our attention is driven towards things that we desire. We just pick them up. Let's say if you are a beer drinker and you walk into a shop, you're more likely to see the adverts for beer than the adverts for wine, for example.
Okay, and hence you can react faster on the keyboard.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Another thing, Brainstem, limbic system, neocortex, right? So there are two different approaches here. So I'm very intrigued in those, let's say, three brains for a number of reasons. One is that there was a mystici from the early 1900s. Gurdjieff, he already spoke about the humans as being three-brained beings.
Yeah.
He wrote a very complicated book. I never really understood what he meant. But this, also for my own research, I completely understand. Brainstem, the oldest part of the brain, limbic system, emotion, neocortex, the youngest, reason, etc., etc. However, there's of course Daniel Kahneman with his book, also Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman with his book Thinking Fast and Slow, where he describes system 1, system 2, and it's exactly coming back to the neuro highway. So system 1 is the quick, without thinking. It's automated in our brain. Interesting, the actual distance is shorter. So the electrons have to travel a shorter distance. And then, of course, we have the neocortex where it's longer, so conscious decisions, etc., etc. So I'm a bit torn between those two, but I don't think that they're necessarily mutually excluding.
I absolutely agree. They're just different models, kind of trying to explain a similar method.
Yes. But and I have seen you speaking very eloquently about brainstem, limbic system, and neocortex. So please elaborate.
I always call it the marketeer's model because it's so simple that even we can understand it. It's on a very basic level, I would say, it's made up of 3 levels, our brain. And first of all, there's the reptilian brain, where we decide on an instinct level if we want to approach something or if we avoid something. Let's say there's some noise in a bush next to me. I need to decide within milliseconds if this is going to be my dinner or if I'm going to be his dinner. And in the limbic system, we process our emotions, like our amygdala and our hippocampus. And in the neocortex, our higher processing orders are taking place, for example, rational thinking and language. So if we want to communicate brain-friendly, I always say that we have to manage all these 3 levels. And we have to start with the reptilian brain. We have to make the reptilian brain snap, as I call it, because we need to get the attention within milliseconds. If the reptilian brain doesn't snap, and if the reptilian brain doesn't say, approach, this message is interesting, the message will not get into the limbic system and not get into the neocortex, where it's actually processed on a rational level. So my message is lost if I don't manage to get the reptilian snap. And the problem is that a lot of messages are still built for the neocortex. We think we can address our customers from neocortex to neocortex on a mere rational level, and that just doesn't work, unfortunately. So we have to get the reptilian snap first and get attention and awareness, and then we have to add some emotion, because emotion is actually the locomotion that takes the message to the neocortex.
Before we go to emotions, how do you get the limbic? How do you get the brainstem?
The reptilian snap. Okay.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are different methods. Just to give you a couple of examples, movement always gets the attention because it could be a dangerous tiger that tries to get us. So if we see movement, maybe in the internet, for example, it gets our attention immediately. High contrast gets our attention. Again, from evolutionary psychology, if animals have got a high contrast color, black, yellow, red, yellow, it's an indicator of, could be dangerous. Poison. Exactly. So contrast gets our attention, and then everything that deviates from the norm gets our attention. Like, for example...
It's unexpected.
It's unexpected. Yes, because then I have to decide within milliseconds again, what am I going to do with that information? And we can use that deviation from the norm in marketing. Well, that's actually what we do. It's we deviate from the norm, we put something in a different context, so to make sure to get the attention of our customers.
Okay, so that's step 1. Now let's move to step 2.
So that's the emotional level. The
Yeah.
emotions on step 2. Emotions are really vital for us. If we haven't any emotions, we're not going to decide anything. So if we want people to decide for our brand or against our brand or for a message against something, we need to add emotions. We're actually not able to make a mere rational decision. It's not possible. There are always emotions involved. However, they don't have to be the brilliant emotions. They could be very subconscious emotions that we hardly be aware of. But they have to be emotions, otherwise we're not going to move. And these emotions could be either positive or negative. We are moving if we have positive emotions, we want to move towards something. Or we are moving if we have negative emotions, like climate crisis gets us moving because we're afraid of that word, and we might actually start behaving differently because of fear. So it gets us moving. If something doesn't get an emotion, trigger an emotion, we can stay the same, we can save some energy because we all like to save energy, and we don't have to react. So if campaigns or brands don't trigger any emotion, you can save your money. And a lot of times that's what we experience when we pitch an idea. People get really excited and say, oh yeah, that's really new and we haven't seen something like that before. And then it moves through the structures of the company. And at the end, the outcome is something where every department is kind of happy with. And then we've lost all the emotion and nobody is going to move anymore. So that's a big,
There are,
could be a problem.
I don't know, there's a lot of research in regards to who makes our decision. One thing it's clear, it's not the neocortex. I read different numbers, but I think there's consensus. Over 90% of all of our decisions are done in our emotional center,
Yes.
so physically in the brain areas of the limbic system, which is emotions.
Mm-hmm.
To make matters worse, we can predict the decision up to 7 seconds in advance. So 7 seconds before someone laying under the fMRI scan consciously makes a decision, we already know what this person is up to. Not always, but up to. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So-
And because so many of our decisions are made on a non-conscious level, and marketing in the end of the day is about decision making, we want people to make a decision for our brand. I think it's absolutely vital that we understand what's taking place there and what's happening on this level.
Yeah. So now you already scratched on it. Yeah. So unexpected that was actually the brainstem. So if we apply the same on the limbic system, so how to best trigger the limbic system, also the emotion?
So we have to plan the kind of emotion that we want to trigger. I always tell my creatives, you either work with a positive emotion. What kind of positive emotion can you create? And then we're also working with different models again. Let's say, for example, if we know one need would be status. We are trying to check, okay, what kind of positive emotions could we use to create status? How do you feel when you've increased your status, for example? Or what kind of negative emotions can we trigger to make people fear losing their status? Because that could be could make people react if they are in danger of losing their status. That's a very strong trigger for people. And then, I think I didn't answer your question properly.
I was just thinking. Exactly, yeah.
So yes, we are planning what kind of emotions we are using, and the best way to trigger emotions is via storytelling. We're thinking about stories and how can we relate to networks that are already established in people's mind, and how can we trigger some of these neurons in their already established networks, and storytelling helps us here.
And now we come to the brain area that is most often or most directly addressed, because people simply don't know what you just explained. That's the neocortex. So whenever we engage with somebody, I had an interesting experience. I'm in non-profit organization, a global organization, volunteering. And I provided my analysis of my geopolitical analysis of what's going on, the root causes of the problem. Yeah. And I addressed it with facts. I had my slides. I showed them facts. Yeah. What I got was a tsunami of emotion in response.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was a clear disconnect between neocortex and limbic system from sender and receiver. Yeah. And having prepared for this interview, I should have applied what you just said, right? From the bottom up, not up down, right? So let's just take this in a very specific context. Let's say you have to give a speech, like you have to give a speech, yeah, a talk, a larger audience. Of course, there's certain basic information, facts that you want to transmit. Yeah? But I would like to figure out your planning strategy because you could apply this in a business meeting. Yeah, in my next conference. Yeah,
we do. Actually, that's what we do.
Yeah. So maybe you can walk us through, yeah, so that anyone without understanding of neuromarketing and evolutionary psychology could apply that in the next management meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, there's a really easy rule to that. You only have to stick to, we call it reptile heart logic. So it's, you imagine a crocodile, a heart, and logic. And that's the
order.
Thank you. That's the order how you give your presentation. You always start with something where the reptilian brain snaps. And when I plan my presentations, I actually start to think, okay, how do I get the attention of people? How do you get attention from people? Again, it could be movement, it could be conflict, it could be contrast, it could be deviation from the norm. I like deviation from the norm. So I start my presentation with something people do not expect, and I've got their attention immediately. Okay, next step is you have to give them something where they can emotionally link to. And that could be something, for example, the liking effect. You speak the same language, you speak the same dialect, you dress the same, you tell them that you're one of them, and they feel a kind of emotion. The emotion doesn't have to be connected to the content of your talk. It could be just a positive emotion. And then you start your chunk of information. It's a small chunk of information, and then you start the order again. And then again, you need something where the reptile snaps. You need emotion. Okay. The next chunk of information. And that's something you repeat and repeat and repeat till you finished your presentation. And in this way, people can listen to you for hours.
This is an absolute gem of information. I was wondering how long, will the effect linger? Mm-hmm. But of course, if you repeat it by every key point that you have to make, it's the same. Wow, absolutely. I'm gonna try this.
And on a professional level, you think about the emotion that you want to create in order for your information to have the biggest impact. Like, for example, if your information is something where you want people to stay the same, where they shouldn't change their perspective, you beforehand put them in a more scary emotion. Because once we are in a more scary mindset, a more scared mindset, we tend to make more conservative decisions. When you want your customers to move towards something new and try out something new or change their perspective, you put them in a very positive mindset before, because when we're in a positive mindset, we tend to be more risky and we try new things. So you can kind of, shape the outcome of your presentation as well.
Positive, negative, risk averse, more risk-taking. Are there any other categories that you could address?
Well, it's something we know that if people like something on an aesthetic level, if they think this is beautiful, for example, they like it better. And if they like something better, they think it's not as risky as something that I don't like. That's true for products that people like, and it's true for people. If I like somebody, I think, I can trust them. I like them, so I can trust them. And it's not as risky. So if you want people to trust you, you can actually work with the liking effect. How do we like people? Well, we like people if they are very similar to ourselves. Mm-hmm.
I had a really good podcast with Robin Drake. He's a former FBI counterintelligence special agent with his focus on Russia. Exactly. And he goes full for trust. Mm-hmm. He has a whole strategy in how to build trust, how to maintain it, etc., etc. It's exactly that, the liking.
And it's true for brands. What's true for people is also true for brands. And especially in a digital context, we try to establish trust by making people like the brand. Mm-hmm.
And all of what you just said, because I have it on my list actually, but we already have it incorporated. I was wondering how we could incorporate this into negotiations, also business negotiations, but it's exactly the same.
It's exactly the same.
The alligator, the heart, and the brain. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And the same, of course, is true for relationship building. Mm-hmm. Now, since we have covered this, I can interject another point which just came up to me. Yeah? Let's say someone has a marketing agency and is not at all yet involved in neuromarketing, right? Mm-hmm. So what would you advise such a such a PR agency?
Okay, so first of all...
How do you get started?
How do you get started? How did I get started? That's probably quite similar. First of all, there is the NMSBA. It's the Neuromarketing Science and Business Association. You can become a member of that. It's it's a global association, and they provide networking, conferences, input. So that's good. Second, there's lots of literature out there that you can read, and I've put together a list of literature. I can give you that list of literature if you want to.
Yes, please. Absolutely. Yes,
please. Link it to your podcast. Yeah,
I do.
And on top of that, I know that there are people who give neuromarketing seminars. I'm one of them. You can book a seminar with me, but there are other people as well who give workshops for companies. We do workshops for companies where we address their agendas and we guide them through a process how they can establish their neuromarketing department within their company, for example.
Okay. And last question in regards to that topic. If you compare your own marketing as a PR company before and after, what is the key differentiators?
The processes are different.
No, the result, everything.
Just
so
from
before, after. Yeah.
Before, after. We've won more awards. More creative awards since then. Our clients are happier because they feel safe in their decision making, and it's easier for them to justify their budgets and their decisions on higher levels. They've got digits, numbers. It's not only about liking, and of course the results. They get better results, better return of investment.
I think it's self-explanatory. I wanted to ask, would you be where you are without neuromarketing? I guess the answer is self-explanatory, I guess, right?
Well, you never know. You never know. Maybe we might be even better without neuromarketing. No, I don't think so.
Good.
No, I think it has put us on the map on an international level, because there are not many agencies at the moment who do apply neuromarketing to their business. There's a lot of research out there, but I don't actually know that many agencies who apply the insights to their daily work and who have established processes behind that.
We are almost done, Gesa. I have one more topic which I really would love to cover: cognitive biases. Right? I mean, sales, framing, anchoring. That's all known. That's not new. Yeah. But maybe you can give us a couple of examples. Mm-hmm. examples of cognitive biases, which are those programs, those ancient programs in our system, which make us react without our conscious awareness. A couple of examples.
I like them, and I've collected them actually, and we like to put them into nice, funny pictures. You can find them all on our website for free, for example. So you've got 100 biases for free on our website. I'm going to
name your website. What's your website address?
Kochstrasse.agency.
I will put it in the
Kochstrasse.agency.
Perfect.
So you get them for free there. Well, and one I really like is beware of faces. Well, our brain likes to see faces. It's actually something where our reptilian brain snaps whenever we see a face, because we've got an area in our brain that only human beings have, the fuzzy form gyrus, that's activated when we see faces. And so that's the reason why we can see faces within the rear lights of cars and in coffee machines, and it immediately gets our attention. So if I want to get people's attention at the top of the funnel, we work with faces because we know it works. So however, you have to be careful with faces. You deeper you get into the funnel and you closer you get to conversion. If you want people to press a button and say, yeah, let's buy, you don't want to have any faces close to that button, because otherwise people's attention goes towards it. There's a face, no button, a face, no button. And we can actually see conversion rates drop when there's a face close to a button. That's one I like. Well, another one that I like is the Benjamin Franklin effect. I like that. It says that if we ask people for a favor, they're more likely to think that we're sympathetic and likable human beings. What happens if I, for example, come to a convention or do some small talk? I would say, excuse me, could you hold my bag for a second where I have to close the laces of my shoe? Or could you hold my glass of water for a second? And people tend to do us this little favor, and in the background of their brain they think, why am I doing this favor to a stranger? I must like her, otherwise I wouldn't do that favor to a stranger. And so we've got this non-conscious liking effect, and they are more open to us afterwards. So that's something that you can use not only in small talk but also in a digital context by asking people for a little favor before they enter your website. Okay, something else that I really like is the Ikea effect. And the Ikea effect says that we like things a lot better, and then we put more value towards things that we have created. So if you buy a cupboard, for example, or if you compare it with a cupboard that you've put together and have assembled yourself with sweat, blood and tears, the cupboard is far more valuable than if you just had to buy the cupboard beforehand. And that's something that you can use in marketing, not only if you're IKEA, but also by asking your customers, for example, for their opinion, because then they're part of the process. You can ask your customers to customize their shoes by just choosing their color or choosing their special color or choosing their special phone rate, for example. It's using the IKEA effect. Everything they've been part of, I value higher. So it's
I have a nice example. There was in the early 50s, there was an American company who they were one of the first who had this kind of ready-made, this cakes. You buy the powder, you put milk in it, put it in the oven, and that's it. Yeah, was a flop. Yeah, then they made one tiny little change. They asked the consumer to put the egg yolk in it and mix it, and suddenly, boom.
I'm cooking.
I'm cooking. I made the cake.
Genau.
I made the cake.
I made the cake. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's something that I realized it's something that you're not only using for products, but you should also use the IKEA effect when you want in change processes. You have to ask your colleagues or your co-workers for their opinion. Once they've voice their opinion, they're kind of part of the process and they put more value towards it.
That's great advice. That's absolutely great. I mean, it's always good to ask other people for their opinion.
And now we know the reason why it's good.
And now we know the reason. I have one on my list. It's the Hobson +1 effect. Maybe you can elaborate.
Yes, we like to be in charge of our own decisions. We like its autonomy. That's a high value for us, especially when we are very young. The younger we are, the more we value our autonomy. I can do it on my own. I am in charge of my own decisions. So that's the reason behind that. And I want to be in charge of my own decisions, and I want to have a choice. I don't want to be forced into one decision, but I rather have to have the choice. Well, if I give people the choice to buy this or not, I have the chance to buy it or not, and I give them the opportunity to say, okay, buy it or put it on a wish list. I give them more choice, and chances are higher that they're deciding towards my favor. And the sweet spot for decision is if you give people one choice plus another one. So let's say you can buy it, you can put it on a wish list, or you can print the offer, which doesn't make any sense, doesn't matter. As long as we've got the choice, we like it, and chances are higher that we decide towards the outcome that we prefer.
Just try to follow this up. So you have three different choices. So how are you directing the choice?
I'm directing the choice if I say, okay, buy, that's the biggest button on my wish list, that's almost as big, and giving the third choice is print the offer, like a smaller button. And you can see that on eBay, on Amazon, you've got Hobson +1 choices. And we use this when we make offers to our clients. We tell them, okay, you can choose between an S, M, or L package. You've got the choice. It's up to you.
Yes.
So the stakes are higher for them to decide towards S, M, or L or not buy. All of a sudden we've got 4 variables rather than just buy or not buy.
Last question. We had a fantastic interview, Gesa. I'm conscious of your time. Yeah. Last question. There is a correlation between cognitive biases and, let's say, the perceived need of the perceiver, let's say safety or autonomy. Right? Can you briefly elaborate?
Yes.
So I think it depends. It's a conscious choice of the strategist which cognitive bias you would want to trigger based on your assumption of what your target's requirements are. Safety, autonomy, they're more. If I got this a little bit right.
It's how we start is, you're absolutely right. We try to establish, okay, what's the need? And here we are working with a model from David Rock, the SCARF model. And the SCARF model stands for S for status, C for certainty, A for autonomy, R for relatedness, and F for fairness. It's easy to remember, SCARF. So, and then we check, okay, what of these basic needs might be the biggest one in this case? And once we've established that, we go to all the neuro insights, as we call them, or biases. And well, actually, we're using our cards and think, okay, what effect actually works towards safety, or what effect works towards autonomy? And then we work with these effects and we check out, okay, which effect helps us the best.
I will definitely visit your website, and I will get myself this card. And you will send me the
literature,
the list,
yeah,
the literature list.
It's not a scientific list; it's a list of books, that I've read in the past, and I think could be helpful.
Yeah. Last question, Gesa. When can we expect your own book?
Good question. Well, the moment I've found some extra hours in the day.
I will be your first buyer.
Excellent.
Okay. Good. Gesa, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you on this lovely morning.
Thank you.
I will follow your progress with interest. Okay. Thank you again for participating. All the best. Thank you for watching. If you came this far, you probably have already realized how easy it is to influence and manipulate people, and that there is a darker side to it. In a challenging time as the present one, it is important that people realize if and when they're being manipulated, especially when this manipulation comes from more or less trusted sources like the mainstream media or international news organizations. This is one of the reasons why I go to such lengths to obtain and distribute this kind of information in the hope that you will use it to the benefit of mankind and not to its detriment. If you liked what you heard, consider subscribing to my channel so that more people get exposure to this kind of content.